The 1970s produced some of the most enduring rock music ever put to tape. But for every Stairway to Heaven that got played into the ground, there were a dozen other songs, just as good, sometimes better, that somehow slipped through the cracks. You heard them on the radio once or twice, maybe sang along without ever learning the name, and then they were gone. Today, we're fixing that. Here are 20 rock songs from the 1970s nobody talks about today. Number 20, Brandy, You're a Fine Girl by Looking Glass. Most people know the melody. Fewer remember who made it. Brandy, You're a Fine Girl was released in the summer of 1972 by a New Jersey group called Looking Glass, and it hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 on August 26th of that year. The song was written by guitarist and co-vocalist Elliot Lurie, and the character of Brandy herself was fictional. Lurie named her after a high school girlfriend named Randy, changing the spelling because it fit a barmaid better. What's remarkable about this song is how it got to number 1 before a single copy was officially sold. A Washington, D.C. radio station, WPGC, started playing it off a test pressing of the album after a record promoter urged them to give it a listen. Program director Harv Moore put it in heavy rotation, and the switchboard lit up. The label Rush released it as a single based entirely on radio requests. Within weeks, it had gone national. Looking Glass never had another top 10 hit. Lurie left the band in 1974, and the remaining members eventually became a different band entirely, later known as Stars. But Brandy never fully disappeared. It got a new generation of listeners when it appeared in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 in 2017. Lurie, who became head of music at 20th Century Fox in 1985, has said he never dreamed the song would last this long. Number 19, Keep On Smilin' by Wet Willie.
You gotta keep on smiling, just keep on smiling.
Wet Willie came out of Mobile, Alabama, and relocated to Macon, Georgia, the home of Capricorn Records and the epicenter of Southern rock in the early 1970s. They made their name opening for the Allman Brothers Band in 1971. Keep On Smilin' was released in 1974 and reached number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100, their biggest chart moment by a wide margin. The song blends Southern rock with gospel undertones and a groove that sits somewhere between the two without fully committing to either. Frontman Jimmy Hall, who also played harmonica on the track, had a vocal range that deserved more attention than the band's limited chart history suggests. The song was the title track of their third studio album, also from 1974. Wet Willie stayed active through the rest of the decade and has continued performing in various configurations in the years since. But Keep On Smilin' is the song most people who remember them remember, and most people who came of age after 1980 don't remember them at all. That's a shame, because this one holds up. Number 18, Couldn't Get It Right by Climax Blues Band.
So I hit the road and made my getaway.
The Climax Blues Band had been grinding since 1968, working their way from a straight blues outfit in the streets of Stafford, England, to a globe-trotting rock band by the mid-1970s. They had 8 albums under their belt before they had their first real hit. Couldn't Get It Right came from their 1976 album Gold Plated, produced by Mike Vernon, and it almost didn't happen at all. The label heard the finished album and told them there wasn't a hit single on it. So the band went into George Martin's London studio without their producer, and over the course of a couple of days wrote and recorded Couldn't Get It Right. The label heard it and knew immediately. The song peaked at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in May 1977, kept from the top spot by Sir Duke, from Stevie Wonder at number 1, and When I Need You by Leo Sayer at 2. Bassist Derek Holt said the song was written about life on the road in America, specifically looking for a motel sign in the middle of the night after a late show. The band's signature dual vocal technique, with Colin Cooper singing the low line and Holt singing an octave higher in unison, gave the song its distinctive sound. It played on classic rock radio for years before quietly fading from rotation.
See the light. No, I couldn't see the light.
Number 17, Green Grass and High Tides by the Outlaws.
If I let you see this place where stories all day too.
The Outlaws came from Tampa, Florida, and while they often get lumped into the Southern rock category alongside Lynyrd Skynyrd and the Allman Brothers, they were a different creature, more influenced by the vocal harmonies of Buffalo Springfield and the Byrds than by blues-drenched heaviness. Green Grass and High Tides appeared on their self-titled debut album in 1975. It was never released as a conventional single, running nearly 10 minutes in its album version. The song was written as a tribute to rock and roll legends. Specifically, according to founding member Henry Paul, figures like Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin. Paul has said the title was inspired by the 1966 Rolling Stones' greatest hits compilation, High Tide and Green Grass, flipped in reverse. The song's extended dual, and at times triple, guitar workout made it a staple of FM rock radio, and it became the band's set closer at every live performance. It remains one of the most technically demanding guitar songs of the decade, and the people who know it tend to know it passionately. For everyone else, it's been sitting on the shelf for 50 years waiting to be discovered. Number 16, Evil Woman by Electric Light Orchestra. ELO gets plenty of love for Mr. Blue Sky and Don't Bring Me Down, but Evil Woman, released in late 1975, was the record that turned them into a global act. It was the band's first worldwide hit, reaching the top 10 on both sides of the Atlantic in early 1976. Jeff Lynne wrote a line in the song that was a deliberate nod to the Beatles' Fixing a Hole, continuing the thread of Beatle-influenced pop that ran through ELO's entire catalog. The song was built on a 3-chord progression with Lynne's orchestral strings layered over a driving rhythm track. Billboard specifically praised the use of the title phrase as a hook, and it is, in the most efficient possible sense. It plants itself immediately and doesn't leave. What's strange is how often Evil Woman gets overlooked when ELO's catalog gets discussed today. It's not quite a deep cut. It charted too high for that, but it rarely tops the lists, and younger listeners who discover ELO tend to land on the later, shinier material first. This one predates the polish by a few years and is better for it. Number 15, Magnet and Steel by Walter Egan.
Now I told you so, you ought to know.
Walter Egan was a singer-songwriter from New York who recorded Magnet and Steel for his 1978 album Not Shy. The song was produced by Lindsey Buckingham and featured backing vocals by Stevie Nicks, both of whom were at the absolute peak of their popularity at the time, fresh off Fleetwood Mac's landmark Rumors album from 1977. The song reached number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the summer of 1978. Nix's voice is all over the track, unmistakable to anyone who knows her. It's one of those songs where the production and the performance are so perfectly aligned that you wonder how it didn't become a standard. Buckingham's guitar work throughout the record has the fingerprints of the Rumors sessions on it, and that's not a complaint. Egan had a follow-up minor hit and then gradually faded from the mainstream. Magnet and Steel remains his calling card, and it's a genuinely lovely piece of late 70s pop rock that deserves more airplay than it gets.
To show the way I feel.
Number 14, Moonlight Feels Right by Starbuck.
The wind blew some luck in my direction.
Starbuck was an Atlanta-based band who released Moonlight Feels Right in 1976, and the song is probably the only hit in rock history built around a featured marimba solo. The band's leader, Bruce Blackman, wrote and produced the track, and the marimba, an instrument almost never associated with rock music, becomes the song's central melodic voice during the instrumental break. It shouldn't work as well as it does. The song reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the summer of 1976. Despite that chart performance, Starbuck remained a footnote. They never had another hit anywhere near that size, and the song itself has spent most of the last 4 decades living in the Remember That One category for people who were around at the time. It's a perfect slice of mid-70s summer radio.
The moon will send you on your way.
Number 13, Long May You Run by the Stills Young Band.
We've been through some things too.
In 1976, Buffalo Springfield alumni Stephen Stills and Neil Young briefly reunited under the name The Stills Young Band and released a single album, Long May You Run. The title track, written by Neil Young, is a quietly beautiful song ostensibly addressed to Young's first car, a 1948 Buick Roadmaster hearse he'd named Mort, which broke down and was sold in 1965 when Young was still an unknown musician. But it reads as something far broader than that, a farewell to youth, to the road, to things that carried you when you needed carrying. Young has said that the car Mort had a profound influence on him during the early part of his career, and this song was written as a tribute. The album was eventually abandoned mid-tour when Young left to pursue his own projects, leaving Stills to finish the remaining dates alone. That story adds a layer of irony to a song already steeped in the idea of things not lasting. It's one of the most affecting songs either man made in that decade, and it almost never gets mentioned when Neil Young's catalog comes up in conversation. Number 12, Never Been Any Reason by Head East.
There's never been any reason.
Head East were a hard rock band from Illinois who made their name on the regional touring circuit in the mid-1970s before releasing Never Been Any Reason on their 1975 album, Never Been Any Reason. The song has one of the most instantly recognizable keyboard riffs of the decade. It announces itself in the first few seconds and doesn't let go. The album was self-produced and originally released independently before being picked up by A&M Records. The song became an FM rock staple and received considerable airplay despite never generating the mainstream chart success its quality warranted. Radio programmers knew it worked. It was just never pushed as a single the way it might have been under different circumstances. Head East continued recording through the early 1980s, but Never Been Any Reason remained the peak. If you've heard it, you remember it. If you haven't, it's worth finding. Number 11, Slow Ride by Foghat. Foghat gets remembered barely, and usually only because Slow Ride shows up in a video game or a commercial, and people suddenly recall that it exists. The song was released in 1975 on the album Fool for the City, and is a textbook example of boogie rock done with genuine conviction. It runs 8.5 minutes in its album version, and every second of it is occupied by a riff that refuses to let up. Foghat were a British band, 4 former members of Savoy Brown, who relocated to America and essentially built a career on the road, logging hundreds of dates a year through the mid-1970s. They became one of the most reliable live acts of the era. Slow Ride was edited down to a more radio-friendly length for single release and reached number 20 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1976. It's a song that sounds exactly like what it is, a band that had been playing 200 shows a year finally putting their whole road-worn energy onto a single track. Number 10, Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty.
Winding your way down on Baker Street.
Jerry Rafferty was a Scottish singer-songwriter who spent the early 1970s in the folk rock duo Stealers Wheel, best known for Stuck in the Middle with You from 1972. Baker Street came out in 1978 from his solo album City to City and is built around one of the most famous saxophone riffs in the history of popular music, played by session musician Raphael Ravenscroft. The song reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the United States and number 3 in the United Kingdom. Rafferty wrote it partly about his own experience living in London while dealing with contractual disputes that kept him from recording for several years. The saxophone line was not originally planned. Ravenscroft improvised it during the session, and Rafferty immediately recognized it as the center of the song. Rafferty was notoriously private and uncomfortable with fame. Baker Street made him wealthy and reclusive in roughly equal measure. He died in 2011. The song still sounds like no other record made in that decade.
But you know you'll always keep moving.
Number 9, Fly Like an Eagle by Steve Miller Band.
What about the children, y'all? With no shoes.
Steve Miller is better remembered for The Joker and Abracadabra, but Fly Like an Eagle, released in 1976, is the deeper, stranger, more lasting record. It was built on a synthesizer loop that Miller developed himself, layered under lyrics that have a floating, almost hypnotic quality. The song ran over 4 minutes on radio and nearly twice that in its album version. The song reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1977. The Steve Miller Band had been making records since the late 1960s, and Fly Like an Eagle sits at the exact midpoint between the psychedelic experiments of the early catalog and the streamlined pop of the later records, spacious and melodic at once. What makes it feel overlooked is that it tends to be lumped in with Miller's more radio-friendly material and dismissed as part of the same hit-making machine. It's a better song than that framing gives it credit for. Number 8, Surrender by Cheap Trick. Cheap Trick from Rockford, Illinois released Heaven Tonight in 1978, and Surrender was its lead single. It reached number 62 on the Billboard Hot 100, a number that tells you almost nothing about how the song was actually received. Live recordings from the period, particularly the legendary Cheap Trick at Budokan album from 1979, show what it actually meant to audiences in real time. The crowd response is deafening. The song is about a teenager who comes home to discover his parents are not who he thought they were, written by guitarist Rick Nielsen, who had an instinct for melodic hard rock that didn't quite fit into any neat category in 1978. It has a chorus that sounds like it was always supposed to exist. The band played it at almost every show, and yet it remains less well known than it should be compared to I Want You to Want Me. Number 7, Driver's Seat by Sniffin' the Tears. Sniffin' the Tears were a British rock band formed in London whose sole major hit, Driver's Seat, was released in 1978 on the album Fickle Heart. The song reached number 15 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1979, having first broken in the United States, which was unusual for a British act at the time, before finding success in the United Kingdom. The song's lean, propulsive guitar riff and the distant, almost detached vocal delivery from Paul Roberts give it an atmosphere unlike anything else on the radio at the time. It sits in a space somewhere between pub rock and something slightly colder and more cinematic. The band's name comes from a line in a John Lennon interview, and their catalog outside this one song is almost entirely unknown. Driver's Seat has showed up in films and television over the decades, which has given it periodic small revivals. But Sniffin' the Tears as a band, and most of what they recorded, remain almost completely invisible. Number 6, Give a Little Bit by Supertramp.
I give a little bit of my love to you.
Supertramp are remembered primarily for Breakfast in America from 1979, but Give a Little Bit arrived 2 years earlier on the 1977 album Even in the Quietest Moments. It reached number 15 on the Billboard Hot 100 and is a gentler, more acoustic song than the slick art pop the band became known for. Roger Hodgson wrote it on acoustic guitar, a 12-string, and the song has a warmth and directness that some of the later, more produced Supertramp material doesn't quite match. It was recorded in the Swiss Alps at Mountain Studios in Montreux, the same facility Queen would later use extensively, including for much of jazz in 1978. The song doesn't get played much on classic rock radio, where The Logical Song and Breakfast in America tend to dominate. That's understandable, but it does mean that one of the more human moments in Supertramp's catalog goes unheard. Number 5, Sail Away by Randy Newman.
Everybody is as happy as a man can be.
Randy Newman is known for film scores and for Short People, which became his unexpected 1977 hit. But Sail Away, released in 1972 on the album of the same name, is the record that showed what Newman was really capable of as a writer. The song is written from the perspective of a slave trader making a pitch to his captives, using the language of promise and beauty to describe the horror of what he is doing. It is one of the most unsettling songs ever made, precisely because it never raises its voice. Newman sings it as a lullaby, a sales pitch, a dream. The instrumentation is orchestral and lovely. The contrast between the sound and the content is the entire point, and Newman executes it with a precision that still catches people off guard when they actually listen to what he's saying. The song did not chart significantly as a single. It never received the kind of airplay it might have if it had been a more straightforward listen. It remains one of the most important American songs of the 1970s, and almost nobody under 60 has heard it. Number 4, Time in a Bottle by Jim Croce.
If I could save time in a bottle.
Jim Croce wrote Time in a Bottle in 1970 after learning his wife Ingrid was pregnant with their son, AJ. He wrote it in a single night, essentially as a private letter. It appeared on his 1972 album, You Don't Mess Around with Jim, but was not initially released as a single. It became a number 1 hit posthumously in December 1973, after Croce was killed in a plane crash in Natchitoches, Louisiana on September 20th, 1973. The song was used in an ABC television special, She Lives, and listener demand after the broadcast was so overwhelming that ABC/Dunhill Rush released it as a single. It hit the top of the Billboard Hot 100 on December 1st, 1973, more than a year after the album it came from. Croce never knew it had become his biggest chart success. It gets called a classic, but it rarely gets called by name in the same breath as other songs from 1973. People know it when they hear it. They just don't think about it the rest of the time. Number 3, Already Gone by Eagles.
Well, I heard some people talking just the other day.
The Eagles' catalog is enormous, and Already Gone, released in 1974 on the Border, tends to get squeezed out by Hotel California, Desperado, and Take It to the Limit when the conversation turns to that band. It was the band's first single with guitarist Don Felder, who had recently joined the lineup. The song reached number 32 on the Billboard Hot 100, which in retrospect feels criminally low for an Eagles record of this quality. It was written by Jack Temchin and Rob Strandland. Temption would also co-write Peaceful Easy Feeling for the band, and Glenn Frey's performance on the track has an energy the band's later, more polished work sometimes traded away for precision. It's the kind of Eagles track that fans cite when they want to argue the band was more than a singles act, and they're right to cite it. Number 2, Shooting Star by Bad Company.
Johnny was a schoolboy when he heard his first Beatles song.
Bad Company released Shooting Star in 1975 on their second album, Straight Shooter. The song was written by Paul Rodgers and tells the story of a musician named Johnny who rises to rock stardom and destroys himself in the process. The character was not drawn from one specific real person. Rodgers has said it was more of a composite of the rock excess of the era, the kind of story that was playing out in real life around the music industry during that period. The song runs nearly 5.5 minutes, long for a rock single of the time, and builds patiently, Rodgers' voice carrying most of the weight before the guitars take over in the final section. It was not released as a single in the United States, but received significant FM album rock airplay throughout the mid-1970s. Bad Company's signature songs tend to be Feel Like Making Love and Can't Get Enough, but Shooting Star is the one that holds up as a piece of writing rather than just a feeling. Number 1, Thunder Island by Jay Ferguson. Jay Ferguson was a founding member of Spirit, one of the great underrated bands of the late 1960s, before going solo in the mid-1970s. Thunder Island was released in 1977 and reached number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100, which makes it more successful commercially than several other entries on this list. But chart success and lasting recognition are two different things. The song has a loose, tropical feel that sits somewhere between rock, pop, and something almost calypso-inflected. It was designed to be played in summer, outdoors, with the volume up. Ferguson had a knack for building hooks out of almost nothing. The guitar line, the percussion, and the melody all feel inevitable once they're there, but they could have gone a dozen different ways. He made the right choices. Ferguson went on to work extensively in television scoring through the 1980s and beyond. Thunder Island remains the one moment where he had the full attention of a mainstream rock audience, and it's been sitting mostly unheard for nearly 50 years. 20 songs, all from the 1970s, all deserving more than the silence they've been getting. Some of them charted high, some barely registered. All of them are worth an afternoon of your time and a good set of speakers. The decade had more music in it than any playlist has ever fully captured. If this brought back a memory or two, or introduced you to something new, hit like and subscribe. There's more where this came from.